discussion called The Next Miracle. Can blockchain bring the Asian tigers back? Leading this panel discussion is our moderator, ZING Yang. ZING has more than 10 years of investment management experience and is currently on the board of directors of Litecoin Foundation. ZING is keen on both the enterprise and mass consumer adoption of blockchain technology and is working on projects related to real-world asset tokenization and its ability to transform trading and investment. So please put your hands together to welcome on stage ZING and our very distinguished panelists.
All right, good afternoon, guys. Hope you've had a very good lunch. We have on stage here SINHAE, Tom,
Robin.
Yes, Robin from HelloGold, Jason, and HOCK. So without further ado, maybe I'll let each of the panelists give a brief introduction on themselves, and then before we hop right into the topic. SINHAE.
Hi everyone, I'm SINHAE Lee, partner at GBIC and Block 72. So GBIC is a global crypto fund. We started in 2016 and we have invested in over 50 blockchain projects. And we are based in South Korea, United States, and China because we think these three regions are the most important markets for the blockchain industry. And we spin off our consulting arm, which is Block 72, and we have over 45 professionals helping our portfolio companies and also like other friends projects to really develop themselves into a global project.
My name's Tom Lee with Fundstrat Global Advisors. I'm one of the co-founders. We are a research advisory firm. We have about more than 150 clients in 16 countries. Their combined assets represent about 75% of all institutionally managed assets. And our business is primarily macro markets and asset allocation, but that also includes cryptocurrencies.
Hi, my name is Robin Lee. I'm the co-founder and CEO of HelloGold. HelloGold is a financial inclusion play. We aim to provide wealth management products and services to the underserved and unbanked in emerging markets. We're currently in Malaysia, but we're launching over the next 6 months in Thailand, Indonesia, Dubai, hopefully Turkey, and various parts of Africa.
Hi, I'm Jason Fang. I'm the founder of managing partner of Sora Ventures. We're a 30 million fund dedicated to blockchain and digital asset investments. We usually lead or lead one project every 6 months. So the first one we did was Mithro, and then the second one we're doing right now is with Alpha Slot with the casino families. Actually, we have a foundation along with our ventures. So the Sora Foundation actually does a lot of post-management service for the portfolio company we invest in. And actually 2 weeks ago, we held a conference called the Sora Summit in Macau.
Hi, my name is HOCK, President of the Singapore FinTech Association. We are a non-profit set up to support the growth of the FinTech sector in Singapore. We are also one of the largest FinTech associations with more than 300 corporate members and international partnerships in more than 35 countries. Our interest in blockchain is really the application of blockchain technology in the financial sector. Thanks.
Great. So the four Asian tigers, as most of you are aware, are Singapore, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and South Korea. And these have pretty much been Asian economic powerhouses, especially since the 1960s and 70s. But over the last 3 decades, we've kind of not really heard so much about these countries, especially in Asia. So now there's the topic of the panel, whether blockchain is this big new thing that's going to help spring the Asian tigers back to life. So maybe we'll start off with the first question to the panelists. What is so special about blockchain, or are there any other external forces that are causing, this new growth that we see in the Asian tigers today?
Yeah, maybe I can kick off. So blockchain by its concept is very global. So before we know that a lot of technological talent and even money was centered around a few very specific locations in the world, including Silicon Valley, right? And I think just being very global concept, I think it actually really opened up a lot of opportunities for those Asian countries. I'm native Korean, but I spent some time in China and the United States, but I probably gonna talk more about Korea here. So in 2017, in November, the Korea accounted over 50% of entire transaction volume of top 12 coins in the world. And you probably heard about kimchi premium, which means the Ethereum price on Korean exchanges was probably 30 to at one point 50% higher than that of on other exchanges. And a lot of my friends, non-Korean friends, ask me why so, right? And I think Korea has been a very hyper-connected society. And the internet, probably the fastest internet in the world, very high smartphone penetration. And also, we are very used to the online banking. So people, like, it's so common that you use 24/7 online banking. And a few years ago, when future and option idea was first introduced in the Korean market, Korea has been one of the top trading country in future and option as well. And I think that trends like apply to the blockchain as well. So Korea still position a very strong position in the secondary market. And probably among top 100 exchanges in the world, Korean exchange, like there are probably 10 to 15 exchanges on that list, considering the trading volume. So combining the fact that almost like 30% of the population in Korea has ever experienced and has traded the cryptocurrencies, and because there have been so many meetups and conferences around the blockchain, so the average knowledge on the blockchain among Korean people is very high. And number three, there have been a lot of reverse ICOs, and reverse ICO means a lot of existing companies with existing business use cases and actual users are building something on top of the blockchain. So combining these 3 or 4 factors, and I believe that Korea has probably the highest chance to show the mass adoption of the blockchain technology. So, and of course, like Singapore, known as very the friendly government, right? So we know that a lot of projects have come to Singapore, and even with the new trend of STO, Singapore government officially announced that they will announce something, new regulation on like the blockchain STO in Q2 2019. And Hong Kong and of course Taiwan, we know that there are very strong technical foundation, especially if you look at the Taiwan market. The core developer of the Bitcoin globally, 4 out of 20 are actually from Taiwan. So we can see that the strong technical foundations that Taiwan has. So I think blockchain definitely opened up a lot of opportunity for these countries for really take a leap to become a kind of global force, just like out of just even in Asia.
Any other thoughts from panelists?
I think it's not just the Asian tigers that benefit from blockchain, because the fundamental benefit of what this has created is that no longer are you constrained effectively by sources of capital, historically Silicon Valley and then more latterly Hangzhou. But now you don't have to be in Singapore or any of these countries. You can actually be anywhere. You can be in Thailand, Indonesia, Myanmar. You can raise at a global level. So I think from a nation building perspective, the use of blockchain and specifically the most common use case, which is the ICO, effectively enables startups anywhere in emerging markets to potentially compete at a global level. So I don't think it's just an Asian tiger phenomenon. It might have been Asian tigers in the first wave, but actually what you're going to see over the coming years, particularly with the STO, is that it will actually roll out into other markets, and that has to be phenomenally good for emerging economies around the world.
For me, I think the beauty of blockchain is if you're doing any investments in blockchain, it's really, really hard to avoid not having crypto involved or token involved. And token could be in two parts, right? It could be used as more of a trading, more like for trading, for speculator, and for use case. For us, it's more about the use case nowadays because the story of having the white paper and then selling a crazy technology story and disrupting the world, that doesn't sell anymore. So now it's more about the real use case. And I think Taiwan and the three other countries can optimize this opportunity because if you look at China, right, it's wholly banned, but the countries around it, you know, they still speak the common language is Mandarin, and a lot of times our community is based on language, and that's kind of like the key, right? If you speak Mandarin, then you're basically able to penetrate through countries that even not even like non-Chinese countries, right? So that's an advantage here that you can optimize a lot of the resource that would appear in China, but because of the ban, now you're able to optimize that somewhere else. So we're very bullish on Taiwan, and obviously we led the round for Mithril, and our goal is basically to get a lot of these projects into top 100, into CoinMarketCap, and if we can do that, then at least we can show, you know, like over time these projects can work with the government, can work with other companies, can work with other projects on building this adoption. But it takes a leader to do that. It's not like if you're nobody, if you don't have any money, it's really hard to do any business anywhere. So you got to hit kind of like the top 100 and then show that you have the ability to sustain at that level. And then you go back to the government or you go back to any project and be like, hey, I got the money, I got the experience, let's work together. And that's what we're trying to invest in. And we don't invest too much. That's why we spend maybe one project every 6 months. But if we're able to do that and we're able to work with the company on that area, then effectively we're kind of moving towards that goal.
If I could just add, I think one of the reasons that Asia Tigers had that remarkable period of growth was their ability to export essentially labor arbitrage, right? That there was a big supply of the workforce. Developed world had a shortage, and so, you know, you could produce goods much cheaper. Asia no longer has excess labor supply, and in fact, the world no longer has excess labor supply. The only place where there's actually an abundance of workers now is continents like Africa. That means the economic opportunity for the tigers isn't really producing things that at a cheaper price, but it's really going to be productivity, you know, producing something that requires less people or producing or exporting something that has value capture. So I think to me, crypto, to the extent any of these tigers can create a blockchain that actually replaces some of the banking system and can be exported globally, that's actually a huge opportunity. But, you know, I think it's really important to think of it from a productivity standpoint.
Yeah. We're coming from the efficiency angle because if you look at Taiwan and Korea, they are industrial powerhouse, very strong in the industrial production. Most of your iPhones are probably manufactured in factories in Taiwan. Similarly for Korea, heavy industry, especially in shipping. So if you look at the applicability of blockchain technology, I think supply chain is one area whereby blockchain can be quite effective in it. So if both of these countries can harness the technology effectively, they could become very cost competitive. So that could be one way for them to continue to lead in that particular domain. And if you look at Hong Kong and Singapore, traditionally we are international financial center. So, and if you look at blockchain again, it is actually quite applicable for capital markets. So I see that Hong Kong and Singapore can actually capitalize on this trend, especially for Hong Kong, the nearest to China. They should be able to benefit in some of the finance-related kind of transaction on the blockchain. And for Singapore being at the heart of Southeast Asia, whereby I think 60% of infrastructure project financing are conducted through Singapore because of the deep and liquid capital markets here. So I see the tokenization of securities could be an area that Singapore could become good at. Having achieved the status as a leading fintech hub, I think Singapore could have a chance to be the next financial blockchain center. And because like, if you look at the Belt and Road initiative from China, a lot of the Southeast Asia countries are involved. So there's also another opportunity whereby financing can be raised through the blockchain technology. Yeah.
So can I just add to the point? I think it's very interesting. And there are many ways to get to success, right? I mean, one of the benefits of being in one of these ecosystems is that you have the ecosystem, you have the breadth of projects to collaborate with. But when you come from, say, Malaysia or Thailand or Vietnam, where the ecosystem is very thin, actually you're forced to innovate. And so, for example, HelloGold, to your point, you know, we are working with government agencies already. I'm going to Turkey next week to talk to the Turkish government for our project. So we've, just like in many ways, emerging markets leapfrog the advanced markets when it came to fixed line to mobile and to internet. We are having to do that because we don't have the benefit of the ecosystem. So we have to go out to look for partners that can support our projects because we don't have 20, 30 projects to work with, which potentially could give us a nudge, who knows. But we're working with the agencies that you guys want to work with once you get to the top 100.
Actually, this segues pretty nicely to our next question, which is, what specific issues, what unique issues do you see blockchain and cryptocurrency solving in this part of the world? We spoke a little bit about the unique advantages of each country, but sort of as a region in Southeast Asia, or are there specific pain points that you think blockchain and cryptocurrencies are especially poised to solve?
You mean in these 4 countries? Or?
Yeah, in general, like how can you apply this technology to solve for issues that are specific in this part of Asia?
Maybe I start the ball rolling. I think top of the mind would be regulation, because like I talk about like actually supply chain and also about blockchain applied to capital markets, right? But the technology itself is still evolving, so you still need a lot of R&D, and then a lot of startups, a lot of companies would need to raise funds, and then because of that, the regulation in many of these countries is still not clear and not built for this kind of innovation. So in my view, regulation will be the biggest hurdle. So, and I believe that in the next few months, you will see a lot more news coming from the Singapore regulator in how to address some of these challenges.
I think that's a really tough question, because that's like asking like, what do you think AI can solve, or what do you think internet can solve? What are the value add of internet? From my experience, I can probably say that there are certain things that in Asia that are quite sensitive, especially in China, and that's like building the next money. I think finance on this, especially fintech, can be very tough if you're touching anything to do with crypto. And I think the fact is, like, anyone sitting here, they're more interested about, okay, what will be the next phase for crypto? How will crypto rise again, right? What are the use cases of crypto? And I think for us, for Sora Ventures at least, 1/3 our portfolio company is actually in gaming and entertainment. And we think that's the low-hanging fruit, especially in Asia, based on the consumer behavior. The games in Korea are just totally different environment. It's like people watch live stream and it's on TV and it's on television. Especially we think that in the future of casino and gaming, esports and video game-based slot machine will be the future. So we think a lot of moving forward, I think the low-hanging fruit, at least in Asia, will be gaming. But the point is, these countries, the 4 Asian tigers, right? That the benefit is you have actually a friendlier environment that you can work with. The key here is not to. I think the problem we're seeing as investors is everyone is still trying to sell a pitch that's like 6 months ago. Like right now, it's more about, okay, you have a token, and you have the token economics, you have the design of the token design. What are ways that you can convince your buyer or your partners to hold and to have a huge chunk of token so that it actually becomes use? Like, what is the actual use case of this token? You don't have to be like, you don't have to pitch to us and be like, oh, we're at that, we're building on Ethereum, or we're building on Quantum, or we're building Neo. Like, that's totally different. I'm not even asking for that. Like, that's like the future, right? That's going to take time. We're just asking a very basic question, which is, what is the use of the token? And I think even nowadays, majority on the projects we see are struggling to answer that question. So embrace the environment you're in, because you're not in China, this is Singapore, if you're from Hong Kong, Taipei or Taiwan, Korea, embrace that environment, because this is the advantage that you see being in Asia. But at the same time, be practical when you're pitching to investors.
For us, it's very clear. I mean, the greatest benefit of this technology is financial inclusion, the ability to reach out to those that don't have access to the formal financial system. Whether it's the generation of projects now, or whether it's the next generation or the generation after that, I think the potential is huge. I mean, I come back to what we're doing. We're having real traction within Malaysia, and we have 30,000 customers. And outside the exchanges is probably quite a sizable population. And we're now exporting our product into all these other markets with partners, mobile operators, post offices, etc. Because there is a real need, we're serving a real need to the end consumer. And to be fair, our end consumer don't really care about tokens, they don't really care about Bitcoin. All they care about is the ability to save with something they understand. We just use the technology just like people buy phones, they just want to have the right kind of features at the right kind of price point. They don't really care what goes on underneath the whole thing. I think the more projects that start doing that for the man in the street that's not part of the ecosystem, the sooner we'll get to a place where we get real mass adoption of the wonderful technology that we potentially have.
I'm actually not sure if I can even agree with that question. So I think, again, like blockchain, if you're aiming to build a public blockchain or even dApps, I think you should not target one very specific country, right? Because I hope that if you want to be a global project, you have to target certain specific segments, not like by country even. Of course, one country probably has like certain characteristic that you can address. But if you look at the blockchain, I think we have to like make the definition that the blockchain, some people think it's basically sound money, right? Just we use to transfer money, and that's basically how we started, right? Like the Bitcoin and Ripple. And there is like the blockchain technology, which is almost like underlying technology that can be used in many different aspects of our daily life. It can be gaming, as Jace mentioned. It can be solving, it can solve supply chain management problem. It can solve voting problem, identity issues, a lot of problems. And if you really need to solve this problem, I think you need to have a global perspective, not just focusing on one specific countries. Right? Because even like if you're doing like the sound money, I hope that you can solve the problem and like bank for those people who are unbanked, but you're not only targeting like these 4 countries. I hope that you can target the Africa. You can target some countries in Southeast Asia. So yeah, I think it has to be really global.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think when I was, coming up with the question, it was really a loose question about Asia, right? Like generally, like unbanked population, logistics, get an infrastructure, all these things that you guys talked about, and how blockchain can come in. And we actually see it, spanning supply chain to regulations to, what he was saying about financial inclusion. Now, what is, I guess, when it comes to regulation that HelloGold was talking about, what does the panelists think about what's the one main consideration regulators should address as it comes to regulation in this very nascent space? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's very clear. It's regardless of the government. It can be Chinese government, Singapore government, Korean government. I think what they want is pretty straightforward. number one, of course, they want to kind of increase the development of the blockchain technology. But because blockchain has the cryptocurrency, so they want to protect their retail investor. And of course, they concern about capital outflow and money laundering, right? So if that's what they want, I think they have to think about how they can still separate the facilitation and development of the blockchain technology while protecting the retailer. I think that's like very consistent from like all the governments, to be honest. Like people think that, oh, China government has the strict regulation, but if you look at what they are doing, actually, they open up Hainan Island as a specific special hub for the blockchain technology, right? And then they open up their blockchain global research. It's basically run by governments, but they still have all the rules to protect the retail investors. So I hope that the governments really think about like how they can use the blockchain technology, but also protecting the retail investor and the capital outflow.
Yeah, I think in general, the government's role or regulators' role should be protecting investors in general. Whether you're a private investor, whether you're a credit investor, whether you're a retail investor, you got to protect the investors. And obviously, we see that in Asia and the U.S. are very different, right? U.S. is SEC and China's bans it, right? It's a very different style, but in the end, China's role is like the SEC, right? Because I lived in China, we're based in China, and so I've seen the entire the time frame when people were just doing ICOs every day, and it was crazy. It was literally out of control, and I could totally see why China banned ICO, and I totally see that's totally needed, right? So. But moving forward, what would be the next step? They would definitely have to offer certain licenses to the low-hanging fruit infrastructure in our ecosystem. So that includes OTC, right? So if you're worried about money laundering, is there a way that you can have a licensed OTC, right? If you're exchanges, right? If you're these are the people that retailers are able to purchase, right? Is there a way that they can offer a certain license for retail crypto exchanges? But these are the things that we're waiting for. Until we see something like this, like fully established, we're not going to see mass adoption. At least mass adoption, I guess, is different. But having the bridge to buying crypto will be very, very difficult, right? And mass adoption is in the investments that we make, kind of basically pushing a lot of pushing crypto, basically. How you can turning speculators into users, turning traditional users from your games or from your app into the crypto holders, right? These are mass adoption, and this is what we're lacking right now. I think Vitalik mentioned this in the San Francisco Blockchain Week. Like right now, the biggest issue is still how can we achieve mass adoption? How can you have a large amount of people holding small amount of crypto? Like we still haven't seen that yet.
All right. Now, we've talked about use cases in some of these countries, natural advantages of some of these countries. Where do you see gaps and perhaps challenges as it pertains to the Asian tigers? And if you wanted to talk about, broadly in other parts of Asia that you see as well.
I think, to be honest, like the mass adoption will come from municipal governments or private blockchain. Probably it's not gonna come from public blockchain because there are a few problems that we are aware of. For example, like scalability issue and a lot to solve still, right? So I think in terms of the mass adoption, these Asian countries are in advance to compare to any other part of the world, just because how we are. I mean, it's hard to generalize everything, but how these four countries are like hyper-connected society, and even like Korea, even for other tech, has been a test bed for a lot of new technology, and especially the like new consumer tech, right? So I think the gap and challenges are, of course, number one. I think the regulations. Again, there is no clear regulations in how people, like the projects and even like, especially projects and even like exchanges and other key stakeholders are playing in this role, in this world, in this industry. So I think it's important to have the clear regulations. And number two, I think a lot of lack of open source mindset. So I mean, we know that the US, the developer are more familiar with the open source. And in Asia, still, people believe in decentralization and there are more closed systems. So that's why I think the mass adoption will come from probably a few projects done by private company or the municipal government. So I think for a lot of projects, you have to think as more open source and how really build the global ecosystem.
My view is that I think the challenges won't be just unique to the 4 Asian tigers, but also globally as well. First thing is that when we talk about like applying blockchain in supply chain, right? You don't need regulators' approval. You can use it, but your key challenge will be integrating with your enterprise resource system and other legacy system. That will be your key challenge. And when we talk about applying blockchain for financial products, right? I think the key challenge will be about governance. While a lot talk about the technology is decentralized, the governance should be decentralized. Unfortunately, if you want to have mass adoption and for institutional investors to come in, governance probably have to be centralized. You will not want project updates to be fragmented and done by respective project. You will probably want a central platform whereby all the transparency can happen. Yeah, so my view is that, I mean, governance is one key challenge that has to be resolved, and centralizing it probably makes more sense.
I think, if you're just looking at financial services products, the biggest challenge, and depending on how you define mass adoption within one regulated economy or mass adoption across a region, the biggest challenge is that regulation, you have no passporting in most regions. The only area where there's passporting of financial products is in the EU. So for your ability to sell something that potentially is going to be regulated in some shape or form by jurisdiction will require licensing in each individual jurisdiction. Otherwise, you're effectively potentially breaching local regs, and that becomes a huge issue. So I think for a lot of players in the financial services space, to the extent they're trying to create something that falls within the regulatory constraints, they have to go local. They can't do out of Singapore and then you sell to the rest of the world. You have to go boots on the ground within the ASEAN region, in Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, all that kind of stuff. You can't kind of do the Tencent model where it's just WeChat and it's not a regulated product. You have to go in, apply for licenses one country at a time, and that could take some time.
Thomas, anything else to add?
Well, the only thing that I would observe is I think maybe the most successful Asian tiger contribution to digital assets that's been globally accepted is Tether, because that is by far the biggest and most widely used stablecoin. So, I mean, I guess there are projects that have seen mass adoption, but so far Tether really comes to mind.
I see. So I guess we're almost near the end of the panel. Maybe just one last question. I know we've been spending the last 35 minutes talking a lot about Asian tigers. Now, what parts of the world do you envision as sort of world leaders in the blockchain space, given current trends? What other countries should we pay attention to?
I think that technical breakthrough will come from the United States, actually like Silicon Valley, just because, as I mentioned, they have been a center of a lot of technical developers with right mindset, means open source, plus capital around like still Silicon Valley, with the SEC regulation. So they are trying to regulate the industry, and I think that's actually a good thing because it's better than just blurry environments. So I think like technical breakthrough will come from the United States, but probably business breakthrough will come from the Asia, and highly likely China or Korea in a sense. Even like if you look at like the China, they have been leveraging their very strong consumer tech foundation to really build up the industry. If you look at all the kind of innovations, so for example, Transico fee mining exchange was first introduced by one of the Chinese exchanges called Fcoin. Still, it's a controversial, but like hundreds of global exchanges are using kind of that concept. And for example, like probably the biggest Ethereum wallet called Token is also by a Chinese team. So again, and there are hundreds of like new consumer apps are coming from China. So I think probably the business side breakthrough will come from China. And I think, again, I briefly mentioned earlier, the mass adoptions and real case uses will come from Korea or probably Singapore in that sense.
I think the dark horse to watch is the UAE, primarily because the governments there are literally forcing every single ministry department to come up with a blockchain use case, real or otherwise. Now, whether they're successful in making some of these things come to fruition or not, I don't know, but they're throwing a lot of effort and money at the problem of creating use cases.
Yeah, if you're looking at tech, obviously Silicon Valley and US, but if you're looking at adoption, probably somewhere in Asia. And I think if you're looking for money, probably still China. Even though China did ban ICO and a lot of crypto, there's still a lot of whales there. There's still a lot of whales. Actually, interesting thing is we've been looking at Russia lately, and there's a lot of technical talents there. And I think that's an area that a lot of people don't focus too much on. So Russia may be an area that, if you're looking for technical talent, that's an area to look for.
I think in terms of financial blockchain, Singapore is a country to watch out for. In terms of lifestyle, unfortunately, I think actually China has a lot of potential, but because of the stance on cryptocurrency, they will not be able to exploit the potential. I rather think that countries like Japan, whereby the society is more open to the use of token to conduct many aspects of their life through tokens, I think Japan is a country to watch out for.
Thomas, concluding thoughts?
Well, the places where crypto has really flourished are the countries that have seen the financial crisis, the worst hit. And I guess the only regions none of the other panelists really mentioned is Latin America. I think there's a ton of work being done on projects in Latin America, and a real very active and growing crypto community down there.
Great. I'm sure you'll agree with me that this has been a very insightful discussion, and maybe put our hands together to thank our panelists, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can we have a round of applause for ZING and her Asian tigers, please? Thank you.